Personality politics seems to work for some politicians, and then again it backfires for others.
Good afternoon. Yes, it was interesting to see in that package Jeremy Corbyn being described, in distinction to the other Labour candidates, as not being bland. It's right to say that it's easy to build a base of support when you have a very different message, a very different approach from the other candidates. And Corbyn, through a mixture of his somewhat retro approach to Labour values and what he's been saying, these big statements about renationalising the banks and various parts of our utilities, is definitely cutting through where other politicians don't. And we see as well in America the charisma of, or at least the personality of Donald Trump cutting through with Republican voters and standing out from a crowded field. It's what politicians can use to gain some popularity, but unfortunately it tends to backfire. It tends to be very divisive. And when it comes to general elections, when bigger groups of people get to vote, and floating voters and people who might not typically vote for that party, they might find those candidates quite Marmite-like, quite divisive. And that's probably what people who are trying to stop Jeremy Corbyn from winning are worried about.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? You know, when it comes down to the crunch of it, when somebody's in a voting booth, they're not going to be thinking about the personality of the candidates. It's ultimately what's in their interest and what is in the best interest of the country.
Sometimes personality helps. It helps some politicians getting over stumbles. There are some politicians out there who we now know and love, and typically they're the ones we can just name with just their first or last name, like Boris or Nigel, who could really get away with murdering someone in the street. Such is the level of popularity that they sustain, and it almost is part of their character. Just as with Donald Trump, it's part of his character to say really outrageous and outlandish things. Nobody would be surprised if tomorrow Jeremy Corbyn said that Britain's food industry should be renationalised, or nationalised indeed for the first time, because it would just be part of who they are. They become almost unshockable to the extent that they can attract voters to pay attention to them and maybe forgive them a lot of things that slightly blander, more nuanced politicians could never be allowed to get away with. And that's the danger for people who are trying to stop that kind of charismatic but quite monochromatic, quite one-dimensional form of politics from succeeding.
Yeah, and I guess another danger is the idea of perhaps alienating a large portion of the potential electorate if you do become a caricature of yourself, if you do move from one extreme to another.
Yes, it's exactly the thing that attracts, a lot of young people to Jeremy Corbyn, the idealism, that very clear, distinct message. But those people who've been around the block a bit and seen these arguments tried and tested and seen the way in which often the reality and the solution to a political problem is much more nuanced and complex, become quite frustrated by those charismatic individuals who try to push things through on the basis of either one simple idea or the force of their personality and their image, because those people tend to stumble when they get there.
And looking at politics here at home, do you see personality politics being a thing that will continue into the future, given the fact that we do have 24-hour news, given the fact that we do have social media, there's 24 hours coverage constantly?
Yes, of course, because it's the thing that most easily allows politicians in a lineup to stand out from each other. It's the reason why Donald Trump could argue against a whole sweep of Republican candidates in last night's Republican debate. He stands out, he gives a clear message, and people need that name recognition when they're in politics, because most people don't pay a lot of attention to politics. They pay attention very briefly when it comes to elections, and that name recognition is invaluable. So there'll always be a focus on the personalities of our leaders. Hopefully it'll be tempered with some respect and appreciation for their ideas and for their policies, but it's always going to be part of why we are interested and why we sit up and pay attention to the people who want to lead us.